Welcome to Zimbabwe. We were under British control as the state of Rhodesia until 1965, when we declared our independence. However, it took until the 1980s for another country, the United States, to recognize our sovereignty. We had only one president in this time, Robert Mugabe. He started out as our prime minister in 1980, but then in 1987 created a spot for himself as president, allowing him to dominate our country's political system. He rigged the 2002 election and started riots to bully his opponent out of the 2008 election. As you can see, our economy has had its ups and downs, but nothing quite as bad as the hyperinflation that we experienced in the late 2000s. This was largely due to Mugabe declaring price controls, causing a panic by the citizens. Since then, we disbanded our Zimbabwe dollar in favor of the US currency. We have embassies all over the world: the United States, the United Kingdom, Egypt, China, Italy, Malaysia, Swaziland, and South Africa, just to name a few. We are also very involved in world organizations. The IMF frequently lends us money. We are a part of the WTO as well as the G77 and other trade groups all over the world. Historically, Zimbabwe's closest link has been to the UK, but now other Western European countries are getting involved as the relationship between us and the British is strained. All African countries are linked with Zimbabwe. Due to Mugabe's party, China, Cuba, North Korea, Iran, Libya, and Palestine are all closely related to Zimbabwe, as we are all on the same political wavelength. The reason that we have chosen to study Zimbabwe and its economy is because we wish to see how the conversion from the Zimbabwe dollar to the US dollar has helped, hurt, or otherwise affected the international trade relations of Zimbabwe with other countries around the world.
Zimbabwe is endowed with several natural resources that include coal, chromium ore, asbestos, gold, nickel, copper, iron ore, vanadium, lithium, tin, and platinum. The three major sectors of Zimbabwe's economy include agriculture, industry, and services. Though agriculture accounts for only 20% of GDP, 66% of the labor force works in agriculture. This is due to the Lancaster House Agreement of 1979, which ordered for Zimbabwe natives to reclaim lands from the minority whites, who had previously owned a majority of the land. Because the Zimbabwe natives were not as efficient at farming, GDP fell as agricultural output fell drastically in the early 2000s. The current GDP of Zimbabwe is $10.8 billion. As you can see from the graph, GDP has increased since the dollarization in April of 2009. Zimbabwe adopted the US dollar as their national currency due to hyperinflation throughout the 2000s. Zimbabwe's involvement in the war with the Democratic Republic of the Congo between 1998 and 2002 caused large amounts of debt, which the government responded to by printing currency. Since adopting the US dollar, inflation has increased from 975% in 2007 to just 7.17% in 2010. Though GDP has been increasing in the recent years, it does not suggest everything is better. The GDP per capita has remained constant at $500 over the last 3 years due to a population growth outpacing the growth of GDP. A few of the major exports include cotton, platinum, tobacco, gold, and textiles. Zimbabwe exports cotton and tobacco because these products are labor-intensive, as Zimbabwe is labor-abundant. In addition, Zimbabwe exports platinum and gold because of its factor endowments in these two natural resources. Trading partners of Zimbabwe include South Africa, China, Congo, Botswana, and Italy. Zimbabwe trades with these countries due to location as well as its comparative advantages, thus following the Heckscher-Ohlin model. Zimbabwe has preferential trade agreements, also known as PTAs, with countries that it borders, except for Zambia. The PTAs allow for a lower tariff rate if the imported good contains at least 25% of Zimbabwean materials. These policies increase exports and decrease government revenue, leading us to ask whether it is a sign the government is becoming less corrupt. Zimbabwe does not attract foreign direct investment because of its corrupt government and low wages. However, China does invest in Zimbabwe due to its high demand in tobacco. Chinese firms produce tobacco in Zimbabwe and ship back the finished products to sell to Chinese customers. FDI amounts to only $105 million, or 0.84% of Zimbabwe's GDP. This percentage is extremely low, as typical countries boast 4 to 5% of GDP as FDI. Very few international firms decide to lend to Zimbabwe as the government is still corrupt. The Global Finance Integrity Organization estimates that between $850 billion and $1 trillion a year are lost to illicit financial flows in Africa. Governments lie and steal, and thus use illicit funds to source drug trafficking, racketeering, and counterfeiting. Because the country is poor relative to the world, Zimbabwe does not lend to others. Unfortunately, Zimbabwe does not rely on international financial flows, as the government cannot be trusted.
In accordance to Zimbabwe's multitude of factors affecting the country's economic outlook, the country has also taken an interesting stand on foreign policy. Up until today, Zimbabwe has been known as an importer of services due to a lack of specialized workforce. This is the natural result of an abundance of unskilled labor and the lack of technology or other factors that can generate large amounts of capital. In addition to this, because Zimbabwe's economy revolves around tourism and mining, there are not a lot of industries and markets for Zimbabwe to explore. In an effort to boost Zimbabwe's productivity and relevance to foreign markets, Zimbabwe released the Industrial Development Policy in 2012. This policy's ultimate goal is to propel the country towards manufacturing high-value goods rather than relying on exporting textiles and ores. A recent policy focusing on expanding foreign trade with Asian countries has also been adopted in Zimbabwe. The Look East policy is a governmental policy designed to increase Zimbabwe's cooperation with modernizing countries in Asia. Currently, Zimbabwe imports 17% of its items from China, while Japan and India and South Korea are all within Zimbabwe's top 10 import partners. The objective is to jumpstart industrialization within Zimbabwe with other Asian countries as they are too undergoing rapid economic transformation. Interestingly, while Zimbabwe is working hard to diversify its revenue-earning base, the country is still under heavy protectionism. Since the 1990s, Zimbabwe has been strictly protectionist. It was this way because the country's leaders at the time felt that cutting off international relations and allowing indigenous citizens to handle all the work in the industry would allow the population to slowly accumulate wealth. However, this is not true, as using these tariffs and quotas against foreign countries, this would inevitably lead to an increase in prices and lower supply. In the end, this protectionist policy has harmed Zimbabwe because there is a net decrease in trade. Another ongoing crisis in Zimbabwe is migration. Since the 1990s, inadequate work conditions and governmental-led seizure of land has resulted in mass migrations out of Zimbabwe. According to the Zimbabwe Central Bank, over 1.2 million Zimbabweans have emigrated to neighboring South Africa, but this does not even include people going to other neighboring countries, such as Botswana or even the United Kingdom. All of these problems can be contributed to the abnormal inflation rates seen in Zimbabwe. Now, with the usage of other foreign currencies, including the US dollar, one can hope that Zimbabwe can direct itself onto the path of international stability and wealth.